It is. We can segue into that and then get to Mike's thing. I think we should talk about Schmidt. The Schmidt hits the fan.
Yes, yes.
Does she have
kind
any
of people we. Oh boy. Yes, we're talking about Nashua City Alderman Ward 1 and New Hampshire State Representative Jan Schmidt, who is just tired of us talking about her all the time, and yet, well, she hasn't learned that we'll stop talking about her when she stops talking about us, because we doubled down. To those who haven't been following the saga on Granite Grok, Jan Schmidt is very upset that we keep talking about her, we keep quoting her own words, we keep putting up her voting record, and of course, Grokster Kimberly, because her daughter made what seemed to be a threat worthy of my AR-15 is ready for you by talking about one of our friends and saying, my friends and I will end this woman, which was taken as a threat. And Kimberly reported upon it, put a picture of her daughter's image up. Her name is Heather Day, and she has continued to make similar types of issuance. Her mom, Jan Schmidt, said, I'm so proud of you. I love you so much. We put those words up too. So she was the one who sent an email to our hosting company calling us a hate site, that we abuse her, that we're basically scum, just as we were talking about. Anything to be able to silence us, because I think she was trying to do to us what I believe the Nashua progressives, probably Jan Schmidt as well, though I haven't proved it yet, silenced Josh Moore's The Patriot Initiative site for 2 days. And more of that story is going to be coming up in a little bit. And it's just a case of they can't stand the debate, as Steve, you said earlier. They don't have any rhetorical skills whatsoever. If they don't like you or like what you've written, they will just delete you, ban you, and in our case, trying to take apart I would say, the most consistent political blog site here in New Hampshire, us, mostly because we have deigned to stand up to her bullying. When you try to silence somebody for good, that's bullying. You're muted.
I know, and I was somewhere else. I wasn't even looking at the screen. Yeah, that's true. And I did read those emails. It was an interesting exchange. It's clear that obviously what her intentions were, but I was looking for some different language from her that I didn't see. Same intent. Doesn't really matter. But we'll continue to keep you updated on that story. Skip will continue to post things up as things develop. We have a lot of other things that we have on the burners, on the front and back burners all the time, always going. But we're going to move on because Mike wanted to give us an update about Brexit, which is becoming this regular part of our program. And since he can explain it better than anybody else, we like to do this. So you have an opportunity to know what the heck is going on over there.
Okay, I was just trying to do a little catch up there. I'm not as well informed this week because it's been a busy work week, but in rough terms, Parliament is prorogued until the Queen's speech in the middle of October, but there are legal challenges. The Remainers, mostly the Lib Dems and Labour Party, and some of the revolting part of the Conservative Party want to keep the EU tied irrevocably, and the UK and EU tied irrevocably together, which is a terrible position to be in, as I've explained before. And Boris got the job specifically by saying he was going to go ahead and get out by the end of the latest negotiating deadline, October 31st, regardless. So these people tried to they did pass a law saying essentially you can't exit without a deal, and that you must ask for an extension. The problem is that there's enough people within the EU, specifically the French presidents, the little pipsqueak Macron, and a couple of the others, that really don't want to give another extension because they can see it's not going anywhere. And they're almost ready to say, enough already, get out. The other pieces of this is everything that Boris has tried to do has been subject to legal challenges. If that sounds a bit like a president we know, it's not dissimilar. The deep state, the globalists do not want to give up. They do not want to give up on their project of tying more and more of the world irrevocably together under common sets of laws and ruling class that is further and further removed from the people. So we had the law that said you can't get out without a deal, and you must ask for an extension, although I suspect Boris will do this in a way that they'll say hell no anyway. We had hopes that the Queen might refuse royal assent on said bill, but she decided not to, possibly so as not to get into the fight herself. I'm disappointed by that. The speaker, the parliamentary speaker, quit his job about a week ago. And this nasty little man with hair that looks like it's modeled after Boris, called John Bercow, schemed with the backbenchers and the opposition to rearrange the parliamentary order paper in order to get these bills, which were antithetical to Her Majesty's government, passed in the first place. He then quit his job and made it quite clear in his departure speech how much he despised the Brexiteers and the public who voted for exit. And he is now thankfully gone. And by the way, it was always the tradition that before ascending the wool sack, that is, sack full of wool that was traditionally the seat of the speaker, one left one's political leanings behind and simply presided over the House. Well, that's not been the case with this guy. And finally, there's the negotiations over whether Ireland should be split. Is the baby to be torn in half and thrown in the bathwater or something like that? There is the Southern Republic, Ireland, with its Prime Minister Leo Varadkar, and there's Northern Ireland, which is part of Great Britain. And there is no customs barrier right now, and the Brits don't want one, and the Northern Irish don't want one, and the Southern Irish would rather not have one. The problem is that Southern Ireland is remaining in the EU, and if Northern Ireland and the rest of Great Britain exit the EU, where do you draw the line for customs checks if you have them? And I think the British government is of the opinion, well, damn, we don't want to mess with this anyway. We're not going to put any checks in. You have a problem, you put up the customs posts, and you piss off the people in Southern Ireland. And furthermore, the conditions that the EU have set for renegotiating what they call the backstop, i.e. where the line on customs and immigration actually gets drawn, is such that there is no position that the British government can take in response that will get them a new deal. So they've pretty much decided they're not going to bother with a new deal. But they are negotiating separately with the Irish government to try and work this out. I even saw lines on a map that suggested that the customs barrier, if any, would be in fact in the Irish Sea, meaning treat all of Ireland as one customs union, even though part of it technically belongs to Great Britain. It's going to be fun, folks, and it's far from over. And as I say, we have the prorogation of Parliament, that is, it's suspended until the Queen's speech, and there's legal challenges to that, and they want to come back, maybe a vote of no confidence, and see if they can't put together a rogue coalition government of the backbenchers and the opposition. And once you get to that stage, you're going to have governments as stable as Italy, which is like New England's weather. Just wait 5 minutes and it'll change.
That's very true.
Thankfully, the UK does not have proportional representation like most of Europe, which is why it has relatively stable government. Over to you.
So 2 points. First, I think people need to understand one of the reasons that we keep bringing Brexit up is something that you said in about one sentence, or maybe a sentence and a half. And that is that a lot of this has to do with rolling up the entire world into one government that is as far from the people as possible, which describes everything the Democrat Party tries to do. And I think they need to understand that if you look at what happens in Brexit with regard to the EU and Great Britain and even Ireland, who I imagine would love to not have any tariffs because they would become incredibly wealthy if everything just poured through Northern Ireland into Ireland, tariff-free, and then back into the EU, and watch them all go blah. That'll never happen because those scumbags won't let it. But I just thought it was.
And indeed, Ireland has lower taxes even than the UK, and is a magnet for businesses, especially for global corporations wanting to do business in Europe. So they don't want to spoil that.
Okay, I'll turn off my mute now so you can actually hear me talking. Another big story this week, Jerry Nadler, who has been running the Justice Committee in the House, has been talking about impeachment. Nancy Pelosi in leadership has been saying, that's not a good look for us. We're not really there. Well, apparently they announced, at least Nadler's committee announced, that they were in the process of trying to formulate some rules or some guidelines on how they would go about proceeding with impeachment. And the real goal here, of course, was to try and do an end around to get access to testimony which was otherwise protected. And the Department of Justice saw what they were doing and said, sorry, we can't give you grand jury testimony because it's protected until you actually announce we are performing this specific investigation into impeachment for this purpose. So the DOJ said, screw you. And I find that to be fascinatingly hilarious because, they think they're being clever. And Bill Barr, who is a genius, just said, no, you actually have to come out and say we're going to impeach him and we're going to investigate him before we'll give you any of this testimony because it's protected.
I think it's terrific. Nadler keeps looking like an impotent little fool, and that's on a good day, and he just can't help himself.
Well, I'm not sure that he's little. You do know that his nickname is Fat Jerry, but he certainly, his brain is rather vacuous. And once again, we see the pontification of the socialist saying, we will do all manner of kinds of things. And he's been there long enough that he should know what the rules and regulations are for doing such. So either that or he's got a very incompetent staff or both. This is all a show. This is just to keep this thing rolling until the election comes up. They're not going to find anything. They're going to make hay over a water drop as opposed to a pool. And they're going to say the pool, the water drop is the size of a pool, and everybody's going to go, yeah, right. They've got nothing at this point. With all of the traction that the Democrats could have brought towards this, you would think that anybody inside or outside of Congress would have brought up or found something that would have had stature enough to do this. They haven't, and I hate what I'm about to say because we saw this happen during the Clinton administration, except there was something for him to be impeached upon, but the whole idea was move on. There's nothing to see here, folks. Well, he lied to us, and that cost him Clinton's license, and a lot of other things. But in the grand scheme of things, he was brought up, but could be found impeachable, and it just dropped. This is nothing more than just a political ploy. They have nothing. They can't do anything else. All
right, Skip, what do you have? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I did see some opinions a few months back that what they're really waiting for, and the reason they won't let this go, is if Trump gets reelected, but they have a decent number of Democrats in the House and Senate, they're still going to keep after him to see if they can't drum him out of office like they did Nixon. Because if Nixon pissed them off, that was nothing. What really got their goat was Nixon got reelected handily. And that is why they went after him and impeached him anyway.
You stopped talking while I was drinking water. You could see me drinking water, right? I'm just going to stop right now and wait for Steve to say something. Okay, we're going to move on because I'm sure Skip has something else he wants to share with us today.
Grok TV.